Sometimes God begins His greatest work in us long before anyone can see the change. There are seasons when life on the outside looks almost the same, but something deep inside you begins to change. You still wake up in the same house. You still walk through the same routines. You still carry the same responsibilities. And yet, something feels different. Your heart feels quieter. Your soul feels more reflective. Certain things that once mattered so much no longer seem as important. And sometimes, in these moments, a quiet question appears inside you. God, are you doing something in me? Because the truth is, there are seasons when God does not start by changing your circumstances. He starts by changing your heart. Before doors open, before situations shift, before the answers appear. God begins a quiet work inside the soul, a work that cannot be rushed, a work that cannot be forced, a work that happens slowly, gently, faithfully. Because when God truly changes the heart, everything else in life eventually begins to follow. But while this process is happening, many people think nothing is changing. For they look at their life and wonder why things still feel uncertain. They pray and feel like heaven is quiet, for as they wait and wait and wait, not realizing that in the quiet, God is reshaping something far deeper than circumstances. He is reshaping the heart. And one day, almost without noticing the exact moment it happened, you will realize something inside you has changed. Your fears do not control you the same way. Your faith feels quieter, but stronger. And the things that once stole your peace no longer have the same power over your soul. Because before God changes your life, He changes your heart. So if lately something inside you feels different, quieter, deeper, more reflective, maybe you are not lost. Maybe you are being prepared. Because sometimes, the greatest transformation God does in our lives begins in places no one else can see. And today, we are going to talk about that quiet transformation. The transformation that happens in the heart before life on the outside ever begins to change. Stay with me for a few moments. Your soul might need this today. There are seasons in life when everything looks normal on the outside, but something inside you is quietly shifting. No one around you notices it. Your routine looks the same. Your responsibilities are still there. Your days continue moving forward just like before. But inside, something feels different. You begin to notice that certain things that once excited you no longer have the same pull on your heart. The noise of the world feels heavier than it used to. The rush of life feels more exhausting than inspiring. And sometimes you cannot even explain why. It is not that you stopped believing. It is not that your faith disappeared. If anything, your faith is still there, but it feels quieter, more reflective, more thoughtful, more aware. And in moments like this, many people become confused. They start asking themselves questions like, why do I feel this way? Why do the things that used to matter so much suddenly feel less important? Why does my heart feel like it is searching for something deeper? But what many people do not realize is that seasons like this are often the beginning of one of the most important works God does in a life. Because before God changes your direction, He often changes your desires. But before He changes your circumstances, He reshapes your heart. And this work rarely happens loudly. It happens slowly, quietly, faithfully. Sometimes it begins with a simple awareness that something inside you is no longer satisfied with the surface of life. You start longing for something deeper, Not more noise, not more achievement, not more pressure, but something quieter, something real. A deeper connection with God. This is often the moment when a soul begins to awaken. The Bible speaks about the heart in a very deep way. In Proverbs 4:23 it says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." Everything flows from the heart. Your choices, your direction, your peace, your faith. And because of this, God cares deeply about the condition of the heart. Not just the actions people see, but the inner place where decisions are born. The place where faith grows. The place where trust is formed. Sometimes God allows a season where things feel slower so that the heart can be reshaped. Because if life changes without the heart changing first, the same struggles often return. But when the heart changes, everything begins to shift from the inside out. And this process cannot be rushed. The world moves fast, but the work God does in the soul often moves slowly, like a seed growing under the soil. For a long time, nothing appears on the surface. No visible change, no dramatic transformation, just quiet growth. But beneath the surface, something powerful is happening. Roots are forming. Strength is developing. Life is preparing to rise. And many people abandon the process because they believe nothing is happening. Sure, but the truth is, some of the most important changes in life begin in seasons that look quiet on the outside. If your heart has felt different lately, more reflective, more aware, more sensitive to what truly matters, this may not be confusion. This may be the beginning of a deeper work God is doing inside you. And sometimes, that quiet beginning changes everything. There comes a moment in many people's lives when the heart begins to slow down. Not because life suddenly became easier, not because all the problems disappeared, but because something inside the soul is beginning to change. For a long time, the world teaches us to move quickly, to chase more, to achieve more, to prove more. More success, more recognition, more certainty about the future. And without even noticing, the heart learns to live under pressure. Pressure to keep up, pressure to succeed, pressure to never fall behind. But the soul was never designed to live that way. The soul was created for something much deeper. It was created for relationship with God. And sometimes, when a heart has been running for too long, God gently slows it down. Not to punish, not to take something away, but to restore something that has been forgotten. Peace. The kind of peace that does not depend on circumstances. The kind of peace that exists quietly inside a heart that trusts God. Jesus once said something very simple, yet very powerful. In Matthew 11:28 he said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Notice that he did not say, "Come to me when everything in your life is perfect." He did not say, "Come to me when you finally understand everything." He said, "Come when you are weary. Come when your heart feels heavy. Come when your soul needs rest." Because rest is not something the world can give. The world can give distraction. The world can give temporary relief. The world can give noise that keeps the mind busy. But real rest, the rest of the soul, comes from being close to God. Sometimes the heart begins to slow down because it is finally learning where true rest is found. And this is often part of the quiet work God does before he changes a life. He teaches the heart to stop depending on constant movement. He teaches the soul to rediscover stillness. Stillness is uncomfortable at first. When life slows down, many thoughts begin to surface. Questions, memories, fears. But God is not afraid of those moments, because sometimes it is in the quiet moments that healing begins. The psalmist once wrote something beautiful in Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. Be still. Not because life has no problems, but because God is still present. Because God is still faithful. Because God is still working even when things feel uncertain. When the heart begins to slow down, it becomes easier to notice something that was always there. God's presence, not loud, not dramatic, but steady, faithful, near. And slowly, the soul begins to remember something important. It was never meant to carry everything alone. Some burdens were never yours to hold. Some worries were never yours to solve. Some answers were never yours to control. When the heart begins to release those burdens, space is created. Space for peace. Space for trust. Space for God to reshape the heart. And sometimes that quiet reshaping is the beginning of a life that feels lighter. Not because everything changed overnight, but because the heart is finally learning how to rest in God. Well, and that is often the first step before God begins to change everything else. There is a kind of work God does that most people never notice. It does not happen in loud moments. It does not always appear in dramatic changes. In fact, many times it begins when life seems almost the same as before. The same streets, the same routines, the same responsibilities. And yet, something inside the heart is being quietly reshaped. This is one of the ways God prepares a life for what is still ahead. Because before God entrusts someone with greater peace, greater clarity, or greater purpose, He first works in the hidden places of the heart. Places no one else can see. Places where fears live. Places where old wounds still echo. Places where quiet doubts sometimes appear. God does not ignore those places. He gently enters them, but then little by little, He begins to restore what life has worn down. Sometimes He restores trust. Sometimes He restores hope. Sometimes He restores the quiet strength that a soul lost somewhere along the journey. But this work rarely happens all at once. The transformation of the heart is almost always gradual, like the slow arrival of morning light. At first, the darkness still feels present, but little by little, the light begins to grow. And before long, the whole landscape looks different. This is how God often works in the soul, not with sudden pressure, but with patient grace. He teaches the heart new ways to see, new ways to trust, new ways to rest. And many times people do not even realize the change is happening, until one day they notice something. The things that once disturbed them deeply no longer have the same power. The fears that once filled their thoughts feel quieter now. The worries that once stole their peace no longer feel as heavy, not because life suddenly became perfect, but because the heart has changed. And when the heart changes, the way a person walks through life begins to change too. The same circumstances may still exist, but the soul carries them differently, with more patience, with more perspective, with a deeper trust that God is still present, that He is still faithful, that He is still guiding the story. And this quiet confidence becomes a new kind of strength. Not loud strength, not forceful strength, but steady strength. The kind of strength that comes from a heart that has learned to trust God again. And sometimes, that quiet strength is the very beginning of a life that is about to change. One of the quiet signs that God is changing the heart is when old things no longer feel the same. Things that once felt important begin to lose their grip. Not because you suddenly rejected them, but because something deeper inside you has begun to grow. And when the heart begins to grow, some things simply stop fitting the way they once did. The conversations that once filled your mind no longer hold the same weight, and the worries that once seemed urgent begin to feel smaller. Even the way you see yourself begins to shift quietly. At first, this can feel confusing. You may wonder why certain things that used to motivate you no longer move your heart the same way. Why the constant rush of life no longer feels satisfying. Why your soul seems to be searching for something calmer, something deeper, something more real. But what you are experiencing is often part of God's quiet work. Because when God begins changing the heart, He also begins changing what the heart desires. The Bible describes this transformation in a powerful way. In Ezekiel 36:26 it says, "I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you." A new heart. Not just improved circumstances, not just better outcomes, but a heart that begins to see life differently. A heart that begins to value different things. A heart that becomes more aware of what truly matters. And sometimes this transformation creates a quiet distance between who you were before and who you are becoming. Not because you are rejecting your past, but because God is gently leading you forward. Growth often feels like this: subtle, gradual, almost invisible at first, but real. You begin to notice that peace matters more than pressure. Presence matters more than performance. Faith matters more than control. And slowly, the heart begins to settle into a new rhythm. A rhythm that is not driven by constant urgency, but by quiet trust. Trust that God is still guiding your steps. Trust that not everything has to be forced. Trust that what truly matters will unfold in the right time. And sometimes the reason old things no longer fit is because the heart is being prepared for something new. Something calmer. Something deeper. Something that aligns more closely with the quiet peace God wants to place within you. Because when God changes the heart, the direction of a life slowly begins to change too. And many times, this quiet shift is the beginning of a new chapter that the soul was always meant to walk into. One of the quietest signs that God is changing a heart is not something people around you can easily see. It is the way you begin to see life, not the events themselves, but the way your soul understands them. There may still be challenges. There may still be uncertainty. There may still be days when things do not go the way you hoped. And yet, something inside you responds differently. Where fear once appeared immediately, there is now a pause. Where frustration once filled your thoughts, there is now a quieter response. Not because life suddenly became easy, but because the heart is slowly learning to see through a different lens. The lens of faith. Faith does not always remove difficulty, but it changes how the soul walks through it. It reminds the heart that every moment is not the final chapter, that every delay is not a failure, that every quiet season does not mean God has stepped away. Sometimes faith simply whispers, God is still here, still guiding, still working, still present in ways we cannot fully see yet. And slowly, this awareness begins to shape the heart. The same situation that once created panic now invites patience. The same uncertainty that once created anxiety now invites trust. Because the heart begins to understand something deeper about the nature of God. God is not rushed. God is not anxious. God is not surprised by the path of your life. He sees the beginning and the end. He understands the moments that confuse us, and He walks with us through them. This is why the transformation of the heart is so powerful. Because when the heart begins to trust God more deeply, the soul becomes lighter. Not because all questions disappear, but because trust becomes stronger than uncertainty. The peace becomes stronger than fear. Hope becomes stronger than discouragement. And slowly, the way you experience life begins to change. Not through dramatic events, but through a quiet confidence growing within the soul. A confidence that says, even here, God is present. Even in this season, God is working. Even in this uncertainty, God is guiding the story. And when a heart begins to live with that awareness, something beautiful begins to happen. Life may still be complex, but the soul begins to feel steadier, more anchored, more at peace. Because before God changes the direction of a life, He changes the way the heart sees. And when the heart begins to see through faith, even the quiet seasons start to feel full of meaning. There are moments in life when the most difficult thing to accept is not pain. It is waiting. Waiting for answers, waiting for direction, waiting for something to change. Waiting can feel heavy. Because the heart naturally wants clarity. It wants movement. It wants to know that the path ahead is certain. But many of the deepest things God does in a life happen in seasons of waiting. Not because God has forgotten. Not because heaven has become silent. But because waiting has a quiet purpose. Waiting slows the soul. It teaches the heart patience. It teaches the mind to release the illusion of control. And slowly, something begins to shift inside. The heart begins to understand that not every step of life must be forced. Some things must grow in their proper time. Just as seeds grow beneath the soil long before anyone sees the first sign of life. The Bible speaks about this kind of waiting. In Isaiah 40:31 it says, "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength." Notice something beautiful about that promise. It does not say that those who wait will become weaker. It says their strength will be renewed. Because waiting with God is not the same as standing still without hope. Waiting with God is a quiet form of trust. It is the heart saying, I do not understand everything yet, but I know God is still guiding my life. And when the heart learns to wait this way, strength begins to grow. Not the loud strength the world celebrates, but a deeper strength. The strength of patience. The strength of quiet confidence. The strength of knowing that the story is still unfolding. Many people become discouraged during seasons of waiting. They assume that nothing is happening. But often, waiting seasons are the very places where God prepares the heart the most. Because if life changed too quickly, the heart might not yet be ready. And God cares more about the condition of the heart than the speed of the outcome. So sometimes He allows the waiting, not to delay your life, but to deepen your soul, to create space for faith to grow, to shape a heart that can carry what is still to come. And slowly something beautiful begins to happen. The heart becomes calmer, less desperate for control, more open to trust, more willing to believe that God's timing is not careless. It is careful. It is thoughtful. It is filled with wisdom far beyond what we can see in the moment. And sometimes the waiting that once felt like a burden becomes the very place where the heart learns to rest. Because when a soul learns to trust God in the waiting, it discovers a peace that does not depend on immediate answers. And that quiet peace is often the beginning of a stronger heart. Sometimes the change God begins in the heart does not start by adding something new. Or sometimes it begins by gently removing what has been weighing the soul down. Or not everything we carry in life was meant to stay with us forever. Some burdens were only meant for a season. Some fears were never meant to define the direction of our lives. Some expectations were never meant to control the way we see ourselves. But over time, the heart can collect many things. Old disappointments, old fears, old thoughts that quietly say you are not strong enough, or not ready, or not capable. And without realizing it, those quiet voices begin shaping the way we live. They shape how we see the future. They shape how we see ourselves. They even shape how we see God. But when God begins transforming the heart, He often begins by removing what does not belong there. Not suddenly, not harshly, but gently, patiently, one layer at a time. The heart begins to release old fears. Old pressures begin to lose their grip. Old expectations begin to fade. And slowly, the soul begins to feel lighter. Not because life has no challenges, but because the heart is no longer holding everything it once carried. The Bible reminds us of this invitation in 1 Peter 5:7. Cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you. Notice the simplicity of those words. Cast your cares. Release what weighs you down. Place it in God's hands. Because the heart was never designed to carry the weight of the entire story. Some things belong in God's hands. Some answers belong to His wisdom. Some outcomes belong to His timing. And when the heart slowly learns to release what it cannot control, something beautiful begins to happen. Space is created inside the soul. Space where anxiety once lived. Space where pressure once grew, or space where fear once spoke the loudest. And into that space, peace begins to grow. Quietly, steadily, faith begins to take deeper roots. Hope begins to return, and the heart begins to understand something important. God was never asking you to carry everything alone. He was inviting you to trust Him with what feels too heavy. And sometimes the moment the heart begins to release its burdens is the moment it finally becomes ready to receive something new. One of the most beautiful things about the way God works in our lives is that He often begins from the inside. Before circumstances change, before answers appear, before doors open, God begins restoring peace in the heart. Not a loud peace, not a dramatic peace, but a quiet peace that slowly begins to settle within the soul. At first, it may be almost unnoticeable. Life still has questions. The future may still feel uncertain. Some situations may not yet have changed. And yet, something inside feels calmer. Not because every problem disappeared, but because the heart is beginning to trust God in a deeper way. This kind of peace is very different from the peace the world offers. The world usually connects peace to perfect circumstances. If everything goes well, then we feel calm. If everything is predictable, then we feel safe. But the peace God gives is different. It does not depend on everything going perfectly. It grows even in uncertain seasons. Jesus spoke about this kind of peace in John 14:27. He said, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you." Notice something beautiful in those words. He did not say He would remove every difficulty. He said He would give peace, a peace that lives within the heart, a peace that remains steady even when life still feels unclear. And when that peace begins to grow, something inside the soul becomes stronger. The heart no longer reacts with the same urgency. The mind no longer feels overwhelmed by every uncertainty. The soul begins to breathe more deeply, because somewhere deep inside a quiet confidence is forming. A confidence that says, God is still here. God is still guiding. God is still writing the story, even if the next chapter has not yet been revealed. This quiet peace changes something important. It changes how the heart walks through life. Instead of rushing, the soul learns to move with patience. Instead of fearing the unknown, the heart learns to trust the one who sees the whole path. And slowly, life begins to feel different. Not necessarily easier, but steadier, more anchored. It's because peace has begun to grow in the deepest part of the soul. And often, that quiet peace is the very first sign that God is preparing something new. There are seasons in life when trust becomes difficult. Not because the heart stopped believing in God, but because life has been heavy. Unexpected disappointments, prayers that seemed unanswered, moments when the road ahead felt unclear. But little by little, those experiences can leave quiet questions in the heart. Questions that are rarely spoken out loud. Questions like, God, are you still guiding my life? Do you still see what I am going through? Are you still working, even now? These questions do not mean faith has disappeared. Often they simply reveal that the heart has been carrying more than it should. And this is one of the reasons God begins his quiet work inside us. Or because before he changes the direction of our lives, he often restores the trust of the heart. Trust is not rebuilt in a single moment. It grows slowly, through small reminders of God's presence, through quiet moments of peace, through unexpected strength appearing when we thought we had none left. Little by little, the heart begins to notice something. God never truly left. Even in the moments that felt confusing, or even in the seasons that felt silent, he was still near, still guiding, still writing the story of your life. The Bible reminds us of something powerful in Psalm 34:18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Notice the beauty of those words. God does not move away from a wounded heart. He moves closer. He meets us in the very places where trust once felt fragile. And slowly, he begins rebuilding what was weakened. A stronger trust, a deeper faith, a quiet confidence that grows even without all the answers. Because real trust does not come from having every detail explained. It comes from knowing that the one guiding your life is faithful. And as that trust begins to return, something inside the soul becomes steady again. Fear loses its loudest voice. Doubt becomes quieter. Checks, and the heart begins to rest in a simple truth. God is still present in this story, even in the chapters that are difficult to understand. And when trust is restored in the heart, the soul becomes ready to walk forward again. There are seasons in life when hope feels distant, not because the heart has given up on God, but because the journey has been long. Sometimes longer than we expected, longer than we planned, longer than we felt ready for. In those seasons, the soul can become quiet. Not empty, but tired. Tired of trying to understand everything. Tired of wondering when things will change. Tired of carrying questions that do not yet have answers. And yet, even in those quiet moments, God continues working inside the heart. Because hope does not always return suddenly. Sometimes it returns gently, almost like the first light of morning after a very long night. At first, the change is small. a moment of peace, a thought that feels lighter than before, a quiet reminder that the story is not finished. Little by little, those small moments begin to grow. The heart begins to believe again, not with loud certainty, but with quiet trust. The Bible speaks about this kind of hope in Romans 15:13. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in Him. Notice something beautiful in those words. This God is called the God of hope, which means hope does not come from circumstances becoming perfect. Hope comes from the presence of God within the heart. When the heart remembers that God is still near, hope begins to breathe again. The future no longer feels completely uncertain. The path ahead no longer feels completely dark, because even a small light can guide the way forward. And slowly, the soul begins to notice something important. The season that once felt endless is not the whole story. The quiet chapter you are walking through is not the final page. God is still writing, still shaping, still preparing something that the heart cannot yet fully see. And when hope begins to grow again, something beautiful happens inside the soul. The weight becomes lighter. The future becomes possible again. The heart begins to move forward with gentle courage, not rushing, or not forcing anything, simply trusting that God is still guiding every step. And sometimes, that quiet return of hope is the first sign that a new season is slowly beginning. There are moments in life when we begin to sense that something is about to change, not in a loud or dramatic way, but quietly, like the subtle feeling that a new chapter is approaching. Often, before God opens new paths in our lives, He prepares the heart first. It's because the direction of a life is deeply connected to the condition of the heart. If the heart is restless, even the right path can feel confusing. If the heart is fearful, even a good opportunity can feel overwhelming. But when the heart is calm, when it has learned to trust God more deeply, the soul becomes ready to walk forward with peace. This preparation is not always obvious. Sometimes it happens through quiet reflection. Sometimes through moments of prayer. Sometimes through the slow healing of places in the heart that once felt fragile. Little by little, God shapes the inner life of the soul. He replaces fear with patience. He replaces pressure with trust. He replaces confusion with a quiet sense of direction. And slowly, the heart becomes steady. Not because every detail is clear, but because it has learned that God can be trusted even when the path ahead is still unfolding. The Bible reminds us of this promise in Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. Notice the invitation in those words. Trust with the heart, not only with logic, not only with certainty, but with a quiet confidence that God sees more than we see. And when the heart learns this kind of trust, something begins to change. The future no longer feels like something that must be controlled. It becomes something that can be walked through with faith. Because the heart understands that God is already ahead of every step, preparing what cannot yet be seen, guiding what cannot yet be understood. And sometimes, when the heart becomes ready, new paths begin to appear. Not suddenly, but naturally. And the next step becomes clearer. The direction begins to make sense. And the soul moves forward with a quiet confidence. Not because everything is certain, but because the heart now rests in the one who leads the way. And often, the moment the heart is ready, is the moment God begins to open the path ahead. When God truly begins changing a heart, the transformation does not stay hidden forever. Sooner or later, it begins to shape the way a person lives, not in loud or dramatic ways, but in quiet choices. in calmer responses, in the way the soul moves through life. Little by little, things that once created tension no longer control the heart the same way. Situations that once caused immediate worry now invite a deeper breath. Moments that once created fear now become opportunities to trust. This is one of the beautiful effects of a heart that God has been quietly shaping. The change may not be visible at first, but the inner life of the soul begins to feel different, more grounded, more peaceful, more aware of God's presence in the ordinary moments of life. Instead of constantly searching for control over the future, the heart begins to rest more fully in God. Instead of carrying every worry alone, the soul learns to place those worries in God's hands. Instead of reacting quickly to every challenge, the heart begins to respond with patience and faith. And slowly, something beautiful begins to unfold. Life is no longer experienced only through pressure or urgency. A new rhythm begins to appear, a rhythm shaped by trust, a rhythm shaped by peace, a rhythm shaped by the quiet awareness that God is walking with you. The Bible speaks about this transformation in Galatians 5:22-23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Notice that these qualities do not appear through force. They grow, like fruit on a tree, naturally, gradually, as the heart remains connected to God. And as these quiet qualities begin to grow within the soul, life begins to feel different. The same world still exists. The same challenges still appear, but the heart walks through them with a new kind of strength. A strength that does not come from pressure, but from peace. A strength that does not come from control, but from trust. And slowly the soul begins to realize something beautiful. God was not only preparing your future, He was transforming your heart so that you could walk through that future with peace. And when the heart learns to live that way, even ordinary days begin to feel full of quiet meaning. There is something interesting about the way God guides a life. He rarely reveals the entire path at once. Most of the time, He simply shows the next step. And often that step becomes clear only after the heart has been prepared. Because direction is not only about knowing where to go. It is about becoming the kind of person who is ready to walk that path. That is why God so often begins with the heart. He shapes the inner life of the soul before He reveals the next chapter. At first, the change may be subtle. A quiet sense that something new is slowly forming. Not yet fully visible, but present. You may notice small shifts in the way you think. New desires growing within the heart. A deeper longing for what truly matters. Things that once distracted you no longer seem as important. And slowly, the soul becomes more attentive to the quiet voice of God. Not a loud voice. Not a forceful direction. But a gentle guidance that brings peace rather than pressure. The Bible reminds us in Psalm 32:8, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. Notice the tenderness in those words. God does not push the heart forward with fear. He guides it with wisdom. He teaches it patiently, step by step, moment by moment. And as the heart becomes more attentive, something beautiful begins to happen. Direction begins to appear naturally, not all at once, but clearly enough for the next step. Sometimes that direction appears through a quiet sense of peace. Sometimes through a new opportunity. Sometimes through a growing clarity about what truly matters in life. And slowly the soul begins to understand something. God has been guiding the journey long before you realized it. Even in the moments when the path seemed uncertain, even in the seasons when everything felt quiet, He was still shaping the road ahead, still preparing what you could not yet see. And when the heart finally becomes ready, the next step begins to appear, not as a sudden command, but as a peaceful invitation, an invitation to trust, an invitation to walk forward, an invitation to believe that God is already ahead of you, preparing the way. And often, that quiet invitation is the beginning of a new direction. Sometimes we only understand a season after we have already passed through it. While we are inside the moment, everything can feel uncertain. The waiting feels long. The silence feels confusing. The direction feels unclear. But later, when we look back, something begins to make sense. We start to see that the quiet season was not empty. It was preparation. Preparation of the heart, preparation of faith, preparation of the soul. Because many of the things God does in our lives are not only about the destination. They are about who we become along the way. The patience we learn, the trust we develop, the peace that slowly grows inside us. Those things do not appear overnight. They grow in the quiet places of life. The Bible reminds us of this in Ecclesiastes 3:11. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Notice the wisdom in those words. In its time. Not always in our timing, not always in the moment we expected, but in the moment that is right. God sees the whole picture long before we do. He sees the beginning and the ending at the same time. He understands how every season is connected to the next. Even the ones that feel slow, even the ones that feel quiet, even the ones that feel uncertain. Because sometimes the seasons that feel the most confusing are the ones that prepare us the most. They shape the heart. They strengthen the soul. They deepen the trust we place in God. And when the time is right, we begin to see something beautiful. The season that once felt heavy was actually shaping something strong inside us. The silence that once felt confusing was actually creating space for peace. The waiting that once felt endless was actually preparing us for the next chapter. And slowly the heart realizes something important. God was not delaying your story. He was preparing you for it. And often, the preparation of the heart is the most important part of the journey. Sometimes the most important changes in life are the ones we do not immediately notice, because they happen slowly, quietly, deep inside the heart. You may not have realized it yet, but something inside you has already changed. The way you respond to difficulty, the way you see the future, the way you carry the weight of life. There was a time when certain worries felt overwhelming, when uncertainty felt almost unbearable, when the silence of a season felt like something was wrong. But now, something is different. The questions may still exist. The path ahead may still be unfolding, but the heart feels steadier, more grounded, more at peace with the journey. This is one of the quiet miracles God performs in the soul. He builds strength where there once was only exhaustion. He builds patience where there once was only frustration. He builds peace where there once was only fear. And many times this strength grows so gradually that we hardly notice it forming. Until one day we look back and realize something. We are not the same person we were before. The heart has grown. The soul has become deeper. Faith has become quieter, but stronger. This is the kind of strength that cannot be created through pressure. It grows through walking with God in every season, through moments of waiting, through moments of silence, through moments when faith was the only light available. And slowly, the heart begins to see something beautiful. God was not only leading you forward, He was transforming you along the way, preparing you to carry peace even in uncertain seasons, preparing you to walk through life with deeper trust, preparing you to become someone who can rest in God no matter what the future holds. And often, that quiet strength is the greatest evidence that God has been working in your heart all along. There is a moment in many spiritual journeys when something inside the heart becomes quiet. Not because every question has been answered, not because every difficulty has disappeared, but because the soul has learned something deeper. It has learned to rest. For a long time, the heart may have been searching for clarity, searching for direction, searching for signs that everything would be okay. And in that search, the soul may have carried a great deal of weight. Questions about the future, concerns about what might happen next, the pressure to understand every step of the journey. But slowly, through the quiet work of God, the heart begins to release that pressure. It begins to understand something beautiful. The purpose of faith was never to control the future. The purpose of faith was to walk with God through it. And when the heart realizes this, something peaceful begins to settle within the soul. A calm that does not depend on certainty. A quiet confidence that God is still holding the story. Even the chapters that feel unfinished. Even the moments that still feel unclear. The Bible describes this kind of rest in Psalm 62:1. Truly, my soul finds rest in God. Notice how simple those words are. A rest in God. Not rest in perfect circumstances, not rest in complete understanding, but rest in God Himself, because when the heart learns to rest in God, life begins to feel different. The future no longer feels like something to fear. The unknown no longer feels like something to resist. Instead, the soul begins to walk forward with quiet trust. Trust that God is present. Trust that He is guiding each step. So trust that the story is unfolding exactly as it needs to. And this quiet rest becomes one of the greatest gifts God gives to the heart. A gift that allows the soul to breathe again, to live again, to move forward with peace. Because sometimes the greatest change God makes in a life is teaching the heart how to rest. By now, something inside your heart may feel a little different. Not because every question in life has been answered, not because every difficulty has disappeared, but because somewhere along this journey, your heart began to understand something deeper. A truth that many people spend years searching for. The peace of the soul does not come from controlling life. It comes from walking with God through it. For a long time, many of us believe that peace will arrive when everything finally makes sense, when the future becomes clear, when the answers finally come, when the waiting is finally over. But life rarely unfolds that way, and slowly, through the quiet seasons of life, God teaches the heart something more lasting. Peace is not found in certainty. Peace is found in trust. Trust that God is present even when the path feels unclear. Trust that He is guiding even when we cannot see where the road leads. Trust that the story of our lives is being written by hands far wiser than our own. And when the heart begins to understand this, a quiet freedom appears. The soul no longer feels the same pressure to control every moment. The mind no longer feels the need to solve every mystery. Instead, something calmer begins to grow. A deeper awareness of God's presence. Not far away, not distant, but near. Walking beside you in every chapter of your life. Even the chapters that felt confusing. even the chapters that felt silent, even the chapters that once made you wonder if anything was happening at all. Because now, looking back, the heart can see something that was not clear before. God was working the whole time, quietly shaping the heart, quietly strengthening the soul, quietly preparing you for the life still unfolding ahead. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this journey is realizing that you were never walking alone. Even in the moments when you felt uncertain, even in the moments when the silence felt long, God was still there, patient, faithful, near, guiding your heart toward a deeper place of rest. And that quiet rest may be the most valuable gift God gives to the soul. For many people, life becomes a long search for peace. A search through achievements, through plans, through the hope that one day everything will finally fall into place. But somewhere along the journey, the heart begins to discover something unexpected. Peace is not something we build. Peace is something we receive. It grows quietly when the soul learns to trust God more deeply. Not only in the easy moments, but also in the uncertain ones. Because faith was never meant to remove every question from life. Faith was meant to hold the heart steady while the questions unfold. And this kind of faith does not shout, besides it does not demand immediate answers. It simply rests. Resting in the quiet assurance that God is still guiding every step, even when the road ahead is not fully visible. And over time, the heart begins to notice something. Life may still hold mysteries. Life may still hold waiting. Life may still hold moments that do not make sense right away. But the soul no longer feels the same urgency to solve everything. Instead, it begins to walk with a quieter confidence. A confidence that grows from experience. The experience of seeing how God works over time. The experience of realizing that many of the things that once seemed confusing later revealed their purpose. The experience of looking back and seeing how God was guiding you even when you did not recognize it. This kind of reflection changes something deep inside the heart. It replaces fear with perspective. It replaces pressure with patience. It replaces anxiety with trust. And slowly the soul learns to breathe again. To live without the constant weight of needing to understand everything immediately. Because somewhere along the journey, the heart has learned a quiet truth. God is faithful, not only in the moments when everything feels clear, but also in the moments when life still feels unfinished. And when the heart truly believes this, a deep rest begins to grow within the soul. A rest that does not disappear when circumstances become difficult. A rest that remains steady even in seasons of waiting. Because the heart now understands something beautiful. God is not only present at the destination, He is present in every step of the journey. And that realization changes everything. If you have listened to these words today, perhaps your heart needed this moment. Not a moment of pressure, not a moment of answers for every question, but a moment to simply pause. A moment to breathe. A moment to remember something gentle and true. You do not have to carry everything alone. The future does not depend on your strength alone. And the story of your life is not resting in uncertain hands. It is resting in the hands of God. Hands that have guided countless lives before yours. Hands that see the beginning and the ending of every journey. Hands that are patient enough to shape the heart slowly. Even when the process feels quiet, even when the road feels long, even when the answers take time to appear, God is still there, still guiding, still shaping, still preparing the next chapter of your life. And sometimes the greatest gift God gives to the soul is not immediate change. It is peace while the change is unfolding. Peace in the waiting, peace in the uncertainty, peace in the quiet moments of life. Because when the heart learns to rest in God, life no longer feels like something to survive. It becomes something to walk through with faith. Step by step, day by day, moment by moment. And even when the road ahead still holds mystery, the soul begins to feel something beautiful. A quiet confidence. A steady peace. Poni, a gentle awareness that God is already ahead of you. Preparing what you cannot yet see. Guiding what you cannot yet understand. And when the heart holds that truth, something inside becomes deeply calm. Because faith does not require perfect clarity. Faith simply holds the hand of God and keeps walking. Before we close this moment together, let us pause for a quiet prayer. God, for the person listening right now. You know their heart. You know the questions they carry. You know the moments that have felt heavy. And today, we simply ask for your peace to rest within them. A peace that quiets anxious thoughts. A peace that reminds the soul that it is not alone. Give them strength for the road ahead. Give them patience for the seasons of waiting. Give them the quiet confidence that you are still guiding their life. And when the path feels uncertain, remind their heart of this truth. You are near. You are faithful. You are still writing their story. Amen. If these words brought a moment of peace to your heart today, you are welcome to stay here as often as you need. This space was created for quiet faith, for healing hearts, for souls that simply need rest. And if this message helped you today, you may share in the comments. What part of your journey has God been quietly working in? Your story might bring encouragement to someone else walking through a silent season. And if you would like more moments like this, you are welcome here anytime. Rest for the soul, a place where faith is gentle and the heart finds rest. Until next time, may your soul remain at peace.